But at least in this moment, they are blown away, going, "Oh, that's that. He really is who he says he is."
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Welcome back to the Bible Study Discussion podcast. My name is Wayne. I'm here with...
Last time I checked, my name is Josh.
Last time we checked, his name was Josh, and we just changed the memory card after we tried that the first time with no room on the memory card. So we'll see if it goes better this time.
Plenty of time for us.
Plenty of time. We are going through the book of Matthew one chapter at a time, just reading, discussing, studying what we can learn about God, who he is, and how that should affect our lives. Today we're in chapter 14. I'll pray and we will get started.
Let's do it.
Heavenly Father, I love you. Thank you for your love and for your grace. God, thank you for your word, for this truth. God, I pray that today you would open our eyes and our ears to see and to hear who you are and how we can live a life that brings you glory, shows your love to others. God, just be with us this day. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Chapter 14, verse 1. When Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, heard about Jesus, he said to his advisors, "This must be John the Baptist, raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles." For Herod had arrested and imprisoned John as a favor to his wife Herodias, the former wife of Herod's brother Philip. John had been telling Herod, "It is against God's law for you to marry her." Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of a riot because all the people believed John was a prophet. But at a birthday party for Herod, Herodias' daughter performed a dance that greatly pleased him. So he promised with a vow to give her anything she wanted. At her mother's urging, the girl said, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a tray." Then the king regretted what he had said, but because of the vow he had made in front of his guests, he issued the necessary orders. So John was beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a tray and given to the girl, who took it to her mother. Later, John's disciples came for his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus what had happened. What a gross story.
Yeah.
Just gross on a lot of levels we can talk about.
Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, who was king when Jesus was born.
Right. So different Herods.
Different Herods. This Herod is not a king.
Right.
And there's other, in this story, in another gospel, where Herod promises anything she wants up to half the kingdom, not his to give.
No.
So don't make drunken promises.
Right.
I think that's one takeaway for
That's
me.
a great takeaway. That's a good one.
And then he had John arrested because John was saying, you actually shouldn't marry this woman who was once your brother's wife, but then you each divorced current spouses to marry each other.
So some things we know from extra biblical sources, historical sources that are not laid out in here, but then Matthew assumes his people that are reading this will know that there were divorces, that Herod's family, first of all, they're all called Herod and Herodias and other things because, I don't know, they really liked their name.
Right.
And their family is a reality show level disaster. And there are divorces and there's cheating and there is all kinds of incestuous things going on. This girl who comes to dance for them, emphasis on the word girl, like young maiden, not like little girl, like, oh, cute little ballerina,
right.
Like young teenager. Yeah, like he is entertaining a party of guys by having a middle school girl come dance for them. And then she, at her mother's urging, requests that a dude gets beheaded because her mother is angry about all of this stuff that John is saying about her new marriage and their family. And so we have a drunk king demanding somebody gets beheaded and his head brought on a tray to be presented to said middle school girl to make her mother happy. What a mess.
And other Gospels mention that Herod kept John around, would listen to him talk. Like, wasn't necessarily a fan of, but definitely didn't want to
Right.
kill. Probably also like John the Baptist, probably being a fan favorite of a big group of people in his area of leadership.
Yep.
That Herod would not probably want to upset needlessly by killing who they considered to be a prophet.
Yes, and yet, so in that sense, he sort of gets himself stuck, having made this oath and wanting to look good, and all kinds of lessons in this story about what happens when we try to look good for other people, and but yeah, I don't know, it just is a gross story, and yet. And it's sort of interesting in and of itself, just because Matthew spends a lot of time sort of moving the narrative along, and here comes to kind of a screeching halt. Like the first two verses there are part of the ongoing narrative and timeline, and then he says, "Okay, I have to go back and like review what happened to John the Baptist because I didn't actually talk about that part, and then we'll come back to the next story." And Herod, what a paranoid dude. As you mentioned, son of Herod the Great, who's king. He has 4 sons. The kingdom gets split between the 4 of them.
Right.
There's all kinds of battles, all that sort of stuff. But that he would hear about the great things that Jesus is doing because Jesus is doing them in his territory. That's his fourth of the kingdom, and that he would leap to, this must be John the Baptist come back from the dead. Like, I don't know if that's guilt. I don't know if that's paranoia.
Right.
We know the Herods are a very paranoid family.
Oh, yeah.
Saw that earlier in Matthew. So probably some daddy issues happening here too. And so he makes this paranoid leap because of this awful thing he did. Just trashy TV stuff happening here. And at the very end of the story, John's disciples come for his body and bury it, and then they go and tell Jesus what happened. Commentaries I looked at said they probably informed Jesus in part because Herod was telling people that he chose to do this. This was his decision, and he did it to keep John quieter because John was causing political issues and gathering people for a political riot. And so maybe they're telling Jesus, "Hey, heads up! This guy kills people who start political movements." So that would include you in his mind. And it's also very possible, maybe even likely, that they went to Jesus and said, "Okay, Jesus, John is gone. We're now following you." So a lot of them at least may have jumped onto the Jesus movement train there too at that point.
Verse 13.
Verse 13.
When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd, had compassion on them, and healed their sick. When evening came, the disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so they can go into villages and buy food for themselves." "They don't need to go away," Jesus told them. "You give them something to eat." "But we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish here," they said to him. "Bring them here to me," he said. Then he commanded the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up 12 baskets full of leftover pieces. Now those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
Jesus is amazing. Jesus had a lot more compassion than I think I do most days. Certainly when I am having a bad day, Jesus just got some terrible news about John. especially if I've reached that point where I'm trying to be alone, having compassion on a bunch of people who are following me around would not be my first instinct.
Right.
And Jesus looked at them and he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. And somehow healing their sick is not actually the miracle of this story. That's what comes next.
Yeah. It's a not very well-known story of Jesus.
Been a couple sermons preached on it once or twice, I think.
Couple sermons. The disciples are worried. Maybe they're worried about how everybody's going to eat. Maybe they're worried about how they're going to eat.
Yeah.
I would have probably been the latter. Like, hey, all these people
are hungry.
Send them away so that we can go to Burger King.
Right. I feel like that's my role in our family. Like, hey, what's the plan for dinner?
Yeah.
I mean, the kids are hungry.
The kids are hungry.
Yeah.
This is, according to one commentary, I read the only miracle recorded in all 4 Gospels.
Yeah.
John doesn't have a lot of the same materials, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but he does have the feeding of the 5,000 there. And, Jesus says they don't need to give away. You give them something to eat. I can imagine, maybe I can't imagine, but I think about being a disciple and being like 5 loaves and 2 fishes isn't enough for 13 dudes. Let alone 5,000 men plus women and children.
Well, one of the other gospels basically makes it's a little boy's lunch.
Right.
Like these are small. Like it's not a loaf of bread. No. Like it's these little biscuits.
It's some fish jerky.
Basically, yeah. And Jesus says, no, that's enough. I was reading that there's a pattern here in this story that shows up actually in all of the feeding stories and miracles in the Gospels, but also shows up in the Last Supper, that there is this pattern of Jesus took and he blessed and gave thanks for it. He broke it and he gave it. And the commentator was that I was reading was I'm not sure what the right word for it is. Wondering, I guess, if or supposing that Matthew was doing that intentionally, or that maybe Jesus was doing that intentionally, and that as they looked back on it, they would be trying to draw people's attention toward the Last Supper, toward the resurrection itself and those kinds of things, the ultimate feast of the Lamb at the end of time. But I thought that was interesting that the prayer part would have been really typical for a Jewish meal, but this pattern showing up over and over again in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it's just that pattern was interesting. What it points to.
Yeah, I think anytime I've heard this preached upon, I'm encouraged by said preacher to think about what I can bring to Jesus. Like this is what they had, and this is what he did with it. And
sure.
Like they didn't have much, which makes me feel good sometimes, because there are most days when I don't have a lot to offer God.
Sure.
But it seems that he can do quite a bit with quite a little.
Yeah.
Mr. The Chosen has told his story of kind of praying and about projects he wanted to work on before doing The Chosen, and like they have a 5-2 on a lot of their stuff, and that is the 5 loaves and 2 fishes that he just felt like this is bring what you have and let God bless it, and it seems that God has. Season whatever coming whenever. I don't remember, because
by the time people, somebody's watching this 11 years from now, they're on season 47 or whatever it will be.
In the book of Revelation by then, I think.
Oh my. The story does not include any lesson for the people. Like we're not told about the people's reaction at all. We don't know if they understood it to be a miracle. They maybe just thought, wow, look at all the food they brought into this incredibly remote place. We don't know what they thought. It appears that the lesson here, at least from Matthew's perspective, was not actually for the people. The lesson was for the disciples. Jesus, we got to figure out, like, make all these people go away. I don't know how much they were grieving and also thought they were headed to someplace remote, and they're losing compassion and they're getting hangry and whatever else. Like, Jesus, send these people away. We got to figure out dinner, and what are we going to eat? And it seems very significant to me that that all the people ate, and it doesn't just say they ate; it says they ate to their fill. And there were 12 baskets left over, one for each disciple. And for them to have dispersed it all and to all come back with, oh, I have enough for me to be full too. God is very, very generous. And I lose track of that generosity when I get hungry for something and don't have it. I love this story and what it teaches us about God's generosity.
Yeah, and the CSB says they ate and were satisfied, and I love that. I've definitely been at eating events. We'll call them dinners.
Okay. Suppers.
I do call them suppers. I get in trouble for that by my family because apparently I don't live in a place where you're supposed to say supper. I am allowed to say supper on Sunday.
Oh.
Funny thing is, we don't often eat supper on Sunday. Like, we'll end up eating like a bigger lunch and then just...
Okay, sure.
Like, I've eaten such a big lunch at 5 o'clock, I just have a little ice cream.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's a good way to live, right? Man. I'm not going to argue with that. Yeah.
But on Tuesday in our small group, people sign up, people bring things. Yeah. And there's some weeks where I eat... like, I want to make sure that everybody has something to eat. Like, some weeks there's just not as much food.
Yeah.
And there are some weeks where I just eat. And I love that these people, they weren't like, 5,000 men, let me take like this much rice. Yeah. Because this will be enough.
Right.
Like, people weren't filling their plates going, let's make sure that I just take my little portion so that we can have enough. They ate and were satisfied. And sometimes I just think, man, that's like, because some days I eat.
Sure.
And for everybody just to eat.
Yeah. And be satisfied. They were filled. This question that just popped into my head. I wonder how long it took the disciples to realize it was going to make it. Like, you start handing out, and you just keep handing, or passing, or like.
Right.
I think it might take until I'm standing there with my basket and everybody else is full to go, oh, like everybody gets fed, and that is a lot of everybody's.
Yeah.
But all taken care of. So this is the last chapter. We were talking a lot about parables, stories that teach a lesson. This is not a parable. This is a thing that actually happened. But there seems to be some significant lessons built in there that Jesus is teaching them about how he takes care of people. Move on to the next story.
Absolutely.
Starting in verse 22. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified in their fear. They cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. After they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. When the people recognized Jesus, the news of his arrival spread quickly throughout the whole area, and soon people were bringing all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. Another, less known story of Jesus' life here.
Yeah, walking on the water. So many good things. And as I was reading this and studying, I was trying to think about who I'd heard talk about this recently, and it took me a minute because, I was pretty sure it was you, but where we were preaching this was quite a while ago.
Sure.
So I'm like, why does this feel so fresh?
Right.
And it's because I just cut the short videos for this last week, and I believe this was the first time of the month when I would have been in kids' church. So that would have been the first time I heard it when I was cutting the short videos last week. So I'm like, because you're currently way past Matthew chapter 14.
Yes, sure.
So I'm like, why is this why did I listen to something so freshly? It wouldn't have been that because but I finally figured it out.
Yes.
It was in fact you saying wise things. And,
I hope so.
for me, one thing, man, poor Peter. Just being able to read back and have courage in his eye. If it's you just said it to him.
Yes, and even if you change this, which some translators switch it from if to because.
Right.
Because it's you, which does have more confidence in it if we want to read it that way. But even then, I don't understand the sentence that follows. Okay, because it's you, I want to do the cool thing you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, why is that your response? You're in the middle of a storm, wind blowing you, from my understanding, likely way off course. They should not actually be that far out to sea.
Right.
And your response is not, oh, good, I'm glad you're here, or wow, that's cool, or it's, I want to do that too. But yeah, the idea that, okay, Jesus, because it reads, at very least in English, it reads like a prove it statement. All right, if it's really you, call me out onto the water. I don't.
Because if it's not really him,
what down you go. I don't know. My brain thinks through the consequences of this statement and does not. I don't understand. But it's not the first or the last time that Peter opens his mouth and I go, oh,
right,
Pete, buddy.
And I think as we just did, it's easy to jump straight to Jesus walking on water and skip past after dismissing the crowds who went up the mountainside to pray well into the night. So as he tried to get alone before he fed 5,000 and then had compassion and taught and fed and healed, that then he still did take time alone with the Father. That it wasn't didn't get to it.
Right.
That it was like this is a priority to spend time alone with the Father and
chose it over sleep.
To choose it over sleep.
Yeah.
I like sleep.
Yeah, I'm really hoping there's no sleep in heaven. It just feels like such a waste of time, which does say more about my priorities than it does anything else. And so the disciples are far away from land. It is the fourth watch of the night. So it is the hours between 2-ish, 3-ish, and so 3-ish and 6-ish. So it might be that time of the night that is the darkest, right? Darkest right before the dawn. We say that for a reason.
Right.
It may also be that there's some sun the light is sort of coming up. Certainly seems bright enough they could see some ghostly figure walking their way. And pretty common societal belief at the time that there's something extra spiritual about the sea, that people who would die out there would haunt it in some way. It's not completely disconnected from reality that they would, or the society they grew up in, that they would feel like there was a ghost. And then Jesus says, no need to be afraid. I'm here. And and then Peter.
And then Peter.
Peter Peters.
I mean, he gets out.
He does.
He walks on the water. He comes toward Jesus.
Yeah. And then falls down, as I talked about a little bit in that sermon. It feels like the hard part of this story to me, and to try to make the rest of the story make sense with it, is Jesus' statement, "You of so little faith, why did you doubt me?" That may be that Peter doubted whether Jesus could continue to help him walk on the water. He looks at the wind and goes, "Oh boy, I can't do this."
Because if the water was calm, you'd be okay.
Right. Yeah. He's like, "Nope, this is too scary." So maybe it's that he just doubts Jesus' ability to sustain him. Maybe he doubts himself. Maybe that's what that Jesus that's the faith he's talking about. But that doesn't make sense with his question. Why did you doubt me? And maybe he is addressing Peter's if statement. And saying, I said it was me. Like, what do you have to get all wet for? Like, I said it's me.
Right. I was going to get in the boat
I
with
was
you.
going to get in the boat. Why did you doubt when I said it was me? Maybe a why did you not recognize it was my voice? And I think really either way we take that story, there's a good lesson for us in having the courage to do the things that Jesus calls us to do. That's how this story seems to be normally told, preached about, sung about, call me out upon the waters, all those things. Also, it's important to have the faith that when God shows up and says, "I'm here," that we go, "Okay, you're here, and I recognize that, and I'm okay with you being here, even if here is still over there a little ways. Here, I'm going to have the faith that you can do something about it, and I don't need you to prove it to me. I don't need you to do something spectacular with my life for me to be okay with you being the one who's here, or to believe that you're here." So this hard question, and then my favorite part of the story is actually the next verse, that it says, "When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped." Because I certainly grew up hearing this story, assuming that Peter slips, starts to sink, Jesus scoops him up, and then calms the storm, and they walk, I don't know, arm in arm back to the boat. And we don't know how far Peter got. We don't know if they were right next to the boat. We don't know any of those things. Regardless, Jesus walks him back into the boat
In the storm.
through the same storm, and then calms it down.
Yeah, I mean, from seeing pictures as a kid, it always feels really close.
Sure.
But Peter had enough time to be walking and then to not be walking. We don't know how close he was to Jesus. We don't know how fast Jesus could move on the water. Right. We don't know how fast Peter was sinking. Was it like, oh, little help? Or was it, was he almost there and then doubt? Because it seems weird to doubt when you're this close. Like, I've made it to you at that point. But so many things that, just get filled into my mind because of a painting I saw when I was 12.
Right.
I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
And obviously not the point of the story.
No.
Not what I need to know because I don't know. And then they worshipped him.
Yeah.
Truly you are the Son of God. Again, I don't know, with reading Mark for another thing and reading this, I don't know how much we've talked about, but seeing in the Psalms where it talks about God having control over the wind and the waves, Jesus calming the other storm, that there was something about, in whatever else they'd seen, that seeing him with that power over nature, over wind and waves, was like the only response was, This
Yeah.
isn't a guy that can heal.
Right.
This is
And this-
something more.
This is something to have that kind of power over really the darkest parts of creation. The most powerful, life-giving, life-taking away part of creation that they would experience. He's got power over that. This is our second time in Matthew seeing Jesus tell the wind to knock it off and calm down. The first time, he's asleep in the boat,
Right.
And they wake him up, and don't you care? We're all going to die. And he says, yeah, you're fine, and calms the storm. And the reaction then is, who is this guy? And then the second time, he is the Son of God. That declaration of, at least in this moment, the reason I say at least in this moment is because it's going to appear in a couple of chapters, like maybe they all get a little tongue-tied and forget, because he asked them, who am I?
Right.
And there's only one of them who manages to come up with an answer. But at least in this moment, they are blown away, going, "Oh, that's that. He really is who he says he is, huh?" Imagine that.
Any main takeaway for you here in chapter 1:4?
That. Oh man, that Jesus's power over things like nature, Jesus's ability to completely change a situation and circumstances. I think there's a lot of problems we run into when we go to Jesus for the express purpose of him changing our circumstances and situation. But the recognition that he does have that kind of ability, that in the face of things like hunger and storms and evil rulers and everything else, that Jesus can, that God still does great things in the midst of that, and often in both these cases it does not look like what the disciples wanted or expected, but it was still good.
Yeah, I think for me it's just really that they ate and were satisfied. That when I come to Jesus, I'm not going to go for scraps or just enough of him, but that truly will be satisfied in him.
Yeah, I read and heard and talked about this story about feeding the 5,000 number of times, and even as I was reading through the commentaries of it last night, it's like, man, that's just reintroducing myself to the story this particular time, going, well, but I wonder if they all got like a little nibble. And then you get to that verse, and they were satisfied. That's incredible. All right, let's ask a question. Ooh, a little spinny. Oh boy. Oh boy.
You only get one.
Okay.
Hopefully it's not the same one you had last time. Because last time you put it back in the middle.
Oh, did I really? Oh my gosh.
You know what?
Terrible at this.
Terrible.
All right, so I guess that means I have to answer first, right?
I guess so.
Okay.
If you didn't have to worry about money, do we ask this one? What would you do with your life? Maybe it's just similar.
I think we probably have asked something similar.
Well, we'll ask this one. If you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do with your life?
Small question. What would I do with my life if I didn't have to worry about money? Do you think that's like if you had enough money,
like
that you could just
you
spend it, whatever?
Have all the money.
Have all the money. Oh man, what do I do with my life? It's so hard. There's so many things. I'm trying to figure out how to not give a roll your eyes, holy answer kind of thing. I would just give it away like crazy. One of my favorite things to do is to be able to, because we have enough that we can give away and bless other people with it, and I'm grateful for that. And it's one of my favorite things to meet somebody's financial need, and I don't know why that in particular is I should have a really more exciting answer, but I'm not really like an adventure person. I should have some sort of like travel the world, check this thing off a bucket list sort of answer, but I don't.
That's a good answer.
All right. How would you like to spend your elder years? Which I suppose presumes that you are not already in your elder years.
Right.
You're elderer than me, but...
I occasionally talk to our mutual friend, Reverend Jesse Jorgensen, about, like, when do you know how to schedule your midlife crisis without knowing... Like, my birth certificate doesn't have an expiration date.
Right.
It's like, how do I know when do I need to schedule this soon? Or how close to the exact middle of my life does it have to be? Like,
I think anywhere in this sort of range of life, I think you'll be fine. Jesse's too young still, but you're probably fine.
So
how'd you spend your elder years?
My elder years. Well, I don't know. Maybe walking through woods, what some people call hiking, but hikers get eaten by bears sometimes.
Oh,
so I just prefer to walk through the woods.
Oh, okay.
I've started playing pickleball.
Right.
Probably because I think it's really fun, and probably because my knees are 42-year-olds. And it's like in 10 years, my knees will be 52-year-old knees.
Right.
And not all 52-year-old knees can play basketball.
Okay.
But I've seen some 75-year-old knees playing pickleball.
Okay.
So I'm like, I should get okay at this now.
Okay.
So that when it's my only option, I'm one of those old guys that's good at pickleball.
Nice.
Not one of the old guys learning pickleball.
Yes. No,
so I guess hiking and pickleball.
Hiking and pickleball.
And keeping my teeth so I can eat. Okay. I don't need my teeth. I like ice cream and Jell-O.
Right. That'll be fine.
I don't know what else I like.
This is a good smoothie.
Good smoothie.
You're all right.
Yeah, I'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You don't need your teeth. Just pickleball, some good walking in the woods shoes. I don't want to call them hiking shoes.
No.
Walking in the woods shoes.
That'd be good.
Okay.
You can let us know in the comments whatever you want, really.
Right. Yeah.
But especially what you hope to be doing in your elder years. Whether that's 2 years from now, because then you'll be elder than you are now.
That's true.
Or
and also, what age do you hit elder years? Because that number used to be a lot younger than it is for me now. I remember thinking 50-year-old people were old.
Yeah.
I haven't thought that in a very long time.
No, sir.
Yeah. What the elder years
If you're 50, you're not old.
No, you're not.
If you're older than 50, I guess email us and we'll have a conversation. And we'll get it figured out.
When does it start? When do my elder years start? All right.
We don't know.
We don't know. Good thing Jesus will be with us always.
Always. The Great Commission, as it's labeled in many Bibles. Jesus came near and said to them, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. You can hit the thumbs up button if you like. You can share this with a friend if you enjoyed it and you think they might. You can leave us comments and tell us what we can do better or what you enjoyed. And we will see you later, alligator.